Did you know there's a weapon so ancient, so powerful that demons tremble when it's used properly? A weapon not forged in iron or fire, but in hunger and surrender. And yet 99% of believers have never wielded it the way Scripture intended. Why? Because it's been buried, hidden beneath centuries of comfort theology, fast food spirituality, and a gospel stripped of its war cry. But make no mistake, hell remembers it. That's why when Jesus encountered a boy tormented by a spirit that wouldn't leave, he didn't just pray. He said something shocking. This kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. Matthew 17:21. So let me ask you something personal. Have you ever felt it? That heaviness that lingers no matter how many hands are laid on you. That thought that whispers things you'd never say yourself. That cycle of shame, addiction, fear you can't seem to break, no matter how many altar calls you answer. If so, this video isn't just information, it's a confrontation. Because today we're going to expose why your breakthrough hasn't come, and how to awaken a spiritual weapon the church has forgotten but hell has not. This is more than a teaching, it's a reckoning. A reckoning with a reality the early church knew the prophets walked in and Jesus himself embodied. We're about to uncover 4 fasting methods hidden in the pages of Scripture. 4 methods that don't just bring personal transformation, they strike terror into the kingdom of darkness. But the first one is not what you think. Stay with me. Because once you see this first method, you'll never look at spiritual warfare or your own struggles the same again. Part 1. The hidden reason Christians stay defeated. He couldn't sleep. A man who had served in ministry for decades. He preached fire, cast out demons, led worship that made people weep. But alone at night, he felt something watching him, a presence he couldn't explain, a pressure he couldn't shake. And no matter how many verses he quoted, it stayed. He came to me broken. And all I asked him was this: what are you feeding? Because here's the truth. You think you're under spiritual attack. You're not wrong. But the twist is, you've been feeding your enemy. Let me explain. Demons are not mindless brutes. They are ancient, strategic, and terribly patient. They don't just attack, they feed. Not on blood, not on ritual. They feed on flesh. They feed on your anger, your distraction, your compromise. And yes, they have feeding schedules. Every scroll, every binge session, every unguarded moment of emotional indulgence that's a refill. You've normalized what God never allowed. You've welcomed what He commanded you to crucify. And now the very thing you call harmless has become the altar where spirits feast. Paul warned us in Galatians 6:8, "For he who sows to his flesh will from the flesh reap corruption." He didn't say you'll reap fatigue or distraction. He said corruption, decay, rot, the erosion of peace. Let that sink in. The enemy doesn't need to possess you if he can pacify you. He just needs you scrolling past conviction, laughing at what once made you weep, excusing what used to break your heart. And now you're spiritually numb, not because you've sinned terribly, but because you've fed the flesh continually. Let me ask you, when was the last time you denied your appetite? Not just food, but attention, comfort, noise. When did you last starve your flesh so your spirit could breathe? The church today is spiritually obese, full of sermons, content commentary, but no fire. Because we've tried to cast out demons, we're still feeding through convenience. It doesn't work. You can't rebuke a spirit that's being nourished by your daily choices. You can't bind what you're secretly entertained by. You can't silence hell while you're still tuned into its frequency. But here's the hope. The moment you interrupt the feeding cycle, they panic. The supply line is cut, and suddenly what felt immovable starts to tremble. This is where real fasting begins. Not a hunger strike, not a trend, but a declaration of war. I will no longer feed what is destroying me. And that man I mentioned earlier, the one haunted in his sleep, he began to fast not just food, but entertainment, social media comfort. And within days, the darkness lifted because he finally stopped feeding it. Now pause. Let this go deeper than motivation. Ask yourself quietly right now, what have I been feeding? What have I excused in the name of rest? What has my comfort cost me in the spirit? This isn't about guilt, it's about authority. And the first step to reclaiming it is recognizing what you've surrendered. Because if the flesh is your sanctuary, then demons are your guests. But if your hunger shifts from flesh to spirit, then the altar changes hands. And trust me, hell notices when the altar shifts. So the question becomes, what happens when you not only stop feeding the enemy, but you start feeding your spirit with something ancient, divine, and violent? What happens when fasting becomes your weapon? Stay with me, because in the next part we enter the place where heaven and hell once clashed and how one man's fast disrupted a demonic empire. Part 2, Hell's War Room and Daniel's 21-day battle. In Daniel chapter 10, we are shown something terrifying. Not a vision of beasts or empires, though Daniel had seen many of those. No, this time, he's caught in the unseen battlefield, a realm where every word you pray is weighed, every cry is recorded, and every delay may be a sign of war. Let me take you there. Daniel had been fasting for 21 days. No meat, no wine, no pleasure, just mourning, seeking, silence. He wasn't asking for gold victory or vengeance. He was asking for understanding, for clarity in a time of national collapse. But nothing came. No voice, no dream, just silence. Have you ever fasted and felt like nothing happened? That's where Daniel was. But then on the 21st day, an angel finally appeared. And what he said changed everything. From the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before God, your words were heard. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia resisted me for 21 days. Did you catch that Daniel's prayer was heard on day 1? But the answer was delayed not by God, but by a territorial spirit, a demonic prince who blocked the messenger in midair. This was no metaphor. Heaven had released a response. Hell had intercepted it. And for 21 days, an angel wrestled with darkness while Daniel kept fasting in the dark, not knowing his breakthrough was under siege. This is the war no one sees. It's not just about what you pray, it's about what stands in the way. Let's pause here. This isn't just ancient prophecy, it's a blueprint. Because it means there are answers already released over your life that have not arrived. Because something is resisting them, not your lack of faith, not God's unwillingness, but hell's interference. Welcome to the war room. Now imagine it. In the unseen realm, there are maps of your future timelines of your prayers, records of every intercession. Demons hold strategy meetings about your relationships, your calling, your weakness. They know when you're on the verge of breakthrough, and that's when they attack not your body but your pipeline. They cut off your mail from heaven. And here's the twist. The angel didn't win the battle until reinforcements came. Michael, the chief prince, was dispatched. But why? Because Daniel didn't stop. Because Daniel kept fasting. Because when fasting joined the battle, heaven escalated the response. This is the secret hell doesn't want you to know. Fasting is not passive. It's aggressive. It doesn't just starve the flesh. It summons angels. It strengthens the arm of heaven. It weakens demonic resistance. When Daniel fasted, the opposition didn't stop instantly. But fasting tipped the scale. Because while demons feast on flesh, angels respond to surrender. And when surrender intensifies, heaven sends more. You may think your fast is going unnoticed, but the truth is, it's being calculated. Every skipped meal, a blade sharpened, every denied craving, a shout of war in the spirit, every moment of silence, a trumpet in the heavens. You are not just waiting, you are waging. And when the resistance breaks, answers arrive not just with clarity, but with power. The angel didn't just give Daniel information, he gave him strength. I have come to help you understand and to give you strength. That's what fasting does. It doesn't just release revelation, it rebuilds your frame to carry it. Because some answers are too heavy for a casual believer. They require spiritual stamina. So let me ask you, what answer has been released over your life, but is still being fought in the air? And more importantly, what kind of fasting might tip the battle? Because in the next part, we expose 4 biblical fasting methods, each one designed not just to help you survive spiritual warfare, but to make demons run. This next section will reveal each method with scriptural backing, unexpected twists, and vivid spiritual impact. Part 3. Method number 1. Warfare fasting. Not all fasting is the same. Some fasts cleanse, some bring clarity, but then there is one forged for war. Warfare fasting. A fast that doesn't just deny the flesh, it engages the heavens and destabilizes hell. This isn't gentle. This isn't silent. This is the kind of fasting where prayer becomes thunder, worship becomes a weapon, and the battlefield starts shaking at your voice. It's a dangerous fast because it's not aimed at blessing, it's aimed at uprooting demonic systems. Jesus said in Matthew 15:13, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots." Did you catch that? Some things in your life weren't planted by God. They were sown by trauma, sin, witchcraft, generational curse, and they've taken root. But when you combine fasting with violent prayer and loud worship, you don't just cut the branches, you tear out the roots. Let me show you what that looks like. I once prayed for a woman who said, "I feel chained, but I don't know why." No visible bondage, no open rebellion, just oppression. As we fasted and prayed, she began to weep. No one touched her, no one shouted. But in the silence, the Holy Spirit revealed the truth. A lie had been planted in her since she was 8 years old. You'll never be free. It wrapped itself around her thoughts, her choices, her identity. And as she began to worship, trembling, fasting for revelation and deliverance, every note she sang became a blade. Every prayer she spoke became a hammer, and the lie was torn out. That's warfare fasting. It's not pretty. It's not Instagrammable. But hell hates it because it exposes its favorite hiding places, the ones in your mind. Demons thrive in silence. They speak in whispers, subtle lies woven through your internal monologue. But when you fast, when you roar in worship, when your spirit refuses to stay quiet, their lies can't survive the sound. Let's go deeper. In 2 Chronicles 20, King Jehoshaphat was surrounded by multiple armies, outnumbered, outmatched. So he called a fast, not just for soldiers, but for everyone, men, women, children. And then he did something no general would ever do. He sent the worshipers to the front lines, not the swords, not the archers, the singers. And as they lifted up praise, "Give thanks to the Lord, for his mercy endures forever." God caused their enemies to turn on each other. They never even had to draw a sword. Praise became warfare. Worship became bloodshed. Victory was secured by surrender. This is the secret. When you fast, you weaken the flesh. When you pray, you open the heavens. But when you worship in the midst of fasting, God fights for you, because he inhabits the praises of his people, especially when they're hungry. There's a reason Paul and Silas didn't just survive prison, they shook it. Not with violence, not with escape plans, but with songs in the dark. And when you add fasting to that kind of worship, the chains don't just fall, they shatter. Let me ask you, what if the atmosphere in your home, your church, your soul is not waiting on a louder sermon, but on a louder praise? This is why the enemy fights your voice, why he floods your mind with distraction, why he silences your prayer life, ridicules your singing, and keeps you numb. Because he knows. When you fast and worship, you don't just survive the storm, you send it back. So I challenge you, don't wait for a worship service. Make your kitchen a sanctuary. Make your living room a battlefield. Let your hunger become your harmony. Because when the spirit of heaviness meets the sound of fasting praise, demons don't argue, they flee. In the next part, we uncover a fasting method even more subversive, where praise is not loud but hidden, where consecration becomes the loudest defiance of all. And this time, your silence will be louder than a shout. Part 4, method number 2, praise-filled fasting. There is a kind of fasting that doesn't shout in agony, it sings in surrender. A fasting so dangerous, demons don't wait to fight. They turn on each other before you even raise a sword. Praise-filled fasting. It's when you combine hunger with worship, not after the breakthrough, before it, when your stomach is empty and your song is full. This kind of praise isn't circumstantial. It's not based on feelings. It's not for likes, applause, or spiritual hype. It's defiant praise, the kind that says, even if he doesn't deliver me, I will still bless his name. Let me take you into a prison. Dark, damp, blood on the walls, chains on the ankles. Paul and Silas, men of God, unjustly beaten, shackled, humiliated. But instead of complaining, instead of collapsing, they sang. Around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening. Acts 16:25. No backup, no guitar, no crowd, just bruised lungs and broken ribs, lifting up the sound of praise-filled fasting. And then it happened. The earth shook, chains fell, doors flew open. But more than that, souls were set free. Because here's the mystery. When you praise in hunger, the chains don't just break, they echo. Your breakthrough becomes someone else's miracle. You may think your worship is small, but in the spirit, it's a detonation. The enemy panics when he hears praise from a starving saint, because it tells him you're no longer controlled by appetite. You're no longer singing because of blessing. You're singing as a weapon. There's something ancient about this. Do you remember Jehoshaphat's army? We talked about it before, but let's go deeper. They didn't just sing on the battlefield, they fasted before they praised. 2 Chronicles 23, Jehoshaphat resolved to inquire of the Lord, and he proclaimed a fast. So when they sang, "Give thanks to the Lord, for his love endures forever," it wasn't a rehearsed performance. It was the cry of the hungry. And the result? Confusion broke out in the enemy camp. They destroyed themselves. What warfare could not do, worship accomplished, but only because it came through fasting. Here's why this method terrifies hell. Fasting weakens the flesh, but praise strengthens the spirit. And when your spirit gets louder than your pain, your worship starts cutting through the air like fire. This is praise with teeth. It doesn't just uplift, it uncovers. It exposes what the enemy has tried to veil. But there's more. This kind of fasting doesn't just release you, it realigns you. It reminds you who God is, not just what he does. It reminds the enemy that you are not a beggar at the gates of heaven. You are a son, a daughter, a royal priesthood. And when you lift your voice in hunger, heaven bends low. Let's slow down here. Have you ever praised when it didn't make sense? Not after the healing, but when the doctor's report was still bad. Not after the relationship was restored, but while you were still alone. Not when the prison door opened, but while you were still in chains. That kind of praise is prophetic. It declares to hell, you may have touched my body, but you will never touch my worship. You may shake my world, but you'll never silence my song. And that song lifted in fasting is a spiritual earthquake. The walls don't just fall, the foundations shift, the atmosphere bends, and the demons flee. So now I ask you, what would happen if for just 3 days you silenced your cravings and lifted a sound? No asking, no begging, just praise, in hunger, in faith. Because sometimes the most powerful deliverance doesn't come when you scream at the devil, but when you sing in spite of him. But what if the loudest act of spiritual warfare isn't loud at all? What if it looks like stillness, surrender, and separation? And this time, we go deeper than what you eat. We confront what you crave. Part 5. Method number 3. Consecration fasting. What if the most dangerous fast is the one no one sees? Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, withdrawn, hidden, set apart. Consecration. Fasting. This kind of fast is not just about abstaining from food. It's about detaching from noise. You're not just turning down your plate, you're turning down the world. Jesus modeled this in a way we rarely talk about. Before he called disciples, before the miracles, before the cross, he vanished. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Matthew chapter 4. And there for 40 days he fasted. Yes, from food, but also from people, from crowds, from approval, from applause. Jesus fasted from distraction. Because we often assume demons only speak through temptation, but sometimes they speak through constant noise. You don't need to be possessed to be paralyzed, just distracted. And in our generation, distraction is spiritual warfare. Every scroll, every notification, every comparison, it dulls your discernment. It clutters your soul until you're spiritually suffocating not from sin, but from saturation. That's where consecration fasting comes in. It's not just removing food, it's removing access. It's reclaiming your attention as sacred ground. Isaiah 58 says, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free, to break every yoke?" But how can chains be broken when your mind is tethered to 1,000 voices? There's a reason Jesus withdrew often, even in revival, even when miracles were breaking out. Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 5:16. He wasn't escaping responsibility. He was protecting intimacy. He knew the secret. You cannot sustain public power without private consecration. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man gifted, passionate, sincere. He served faithfully, sang beautifully, prayed loudly, but inside he was hollow, spiritually empty. Not because of sin, but because he had no silence, no time to hear, no space to be still. So he did something radical. He fasted not just from food, but from noise. No social media, no news, no music, no screens. He took 3 days in solitude. He said the first 24 hours were torture. The silence was deafening. But then clarity came. Old memories resurfaced. Bitterness was exposed. And in that stillness, God began to speak. Consecration fasting does this. It makes you confront the parts of you that distraction has protected. Because here's the truth. Some of the loudest demonic strongholds in your life are being disguised as just being busy. But when you fast from everything else, your spirit becomes still enough to hear the whisper of God again. That's the goal. Not just abstaining from things, but becoming available to someone. Consecration isn't about isolation for the sake of loneliness. It's about separation for the sake of alignment. God doesn't just want your time. He wants your undivided gaze, and you'll never hear his strategy while you're still addicted to stimulation. So here's the challenge. What if you unplugged? What if you deleted the app? What if you shut off the noise and listened again? The reward of this fast is not external. It's internal. Stillness, clarity, purity, fire. Because when your spirit is no longer dulled by the noise of the world, even a whisper from God becomes a shout in the soul. But what if the next level isn't just stillness? It's sight, where fasting doesn't just make you holy, it opens your eyes to what the enemy is planning next. Part 6, method number 4, revelatory fasting. Some fasts are for strength, others are for deliverance, but this one is for sight. Revelatory fasting is not about surviving spiritual attacks. It's about seeing them before they happen. This is the most feared fast in hell's arsenal, not because it's the loudest, but because it uncovers. You see, Satan's greatest weapon has never been power. It's never been possession. It's never even been fear. It's deception. From Eden to now, his most effective tactic is to hide in plain sight, to make you question what God said, to blur the line between good and evil, to mask bondage as freedom, to make you defend the very spirit that's destroying you. But when you fast for revelation, the veil begins to rip. Not only do you hear God more clearly, you see the enemy more precisely. That's the power of this method. You begin to discern motives in people's words. You recognize familiar spirits trying to return in new forms. You sense atmospheres shift before others notice. And more than that, you receive instruction for what's ahead. Let's look at the prophet Daniel again. Before he ever fasted for angelic warfare, he fasted for insight. Daniel understood from the scriptures. Daniel 9:2. So I turned to the Lord God and pleaded with him in prayer and fasting. Daniel 9:3. And what did he receive? Not just personal breakthrough, but a timeline of human history, visions that would shape nations, prophecy that still shakes theologians today. That didn't come from food deprivation, it came from spiritual hunger for truth. Imagine this. A man kneels in prayer, eyes closed. He's been fasting 3 days. No food, no phone, no noise. Suddenly a light breaks through the ceiling, not physical light revelation, and around him shadows begin to move. Hidden spirits, ones that had masqueraded as friends' habits, thoughts begin to recoil in panic, because he can now see them, their tactics, their patterns, their entrances, all exposed, all trembling. This is what happens when you fast for revelation. You don't just react, you anticipate. You don't just bind the enemy, you outmaneuver him. Why? Because you've seen the trap before it was even set. Let's talk Jesus. Before he began his ministry, Jesus fasted in the wilderness. And in that fast, he didn't just resist the devil, he recognized him. Satan came with scripture, twisted truth, spiritual language. But Jesus saw the deception line for line. Why? Because his spirit was sharp, his senses were awakened, his discernment was on fire. That's what this fast does. It makes your spirit sharper than your emotions, so that when manipulation comes cloaked in kindness or destruction comes wrapped in beauty, you don't fall for it, because you've seen the blueprint. Let's pause. Have you ever made a decision that felt right, but ended in regret? That relationship, that opportunity, that yes. What if you had fasted first, not out of fear, but out of alignment? What if your biggest heartbreak could have been avoided, not by more caution, but by more clarity? That's what this fast protects, not just your future, but your vision of it. So here's the question. What battle are you fighting blind? What deception is wearing a friendly face? What trap has been set, but you haven't seen it yet? Revelatory fasting isn't optional, not in this generation, not in this war, because we are not just fighting demons, we are fighting delusions, and the only way to walk in victory is to walk in revelation. But what happens when you begin practicing all 4 fasting methods? What happens when fasting becomes your lifestyle, not just your emergency plan? And trust me, demons don't just flee, they prepare for exile. Part 7. The spiritual fallout. What happens when you fast? Fasting doesn't end with you, it begins with you. But the aftershocks, they ripple outward, beyond your body, beyond your prayers, beyond your room. This is the fallout. The spiritual aftermath of a life laid down. You thought fasting was personal, but in the realm of the spirit, nothing surrendered in secret stays small. Every fast creates a shockwave. The moment you begin, something shifts, not just in heaven, not just in hell, but in the air around you. Suddenly, your prayers don't just sound louder, they carry weight. They slice, they strike, they cut through atmospheres like divine artillery. Because now, you're not just speaking, you're wielding a sword. Isaiah 49:2 says, "He made my mouth like a sharpened sword." That's what happens when you fast. Your words stop being soft. They become surgical, strategic, spirit-charged. You're not just praying louder, you're praying heavier. Demons scatter. Atmospheres shift. Chains fall off people around you, not just you. I've seen it happen. A woman fasted not for herself, but for her addicted son. He wasn't praying. He wasn't interested. But one night, without warning, he broke down in tears, flushed the drugs, and came home. Why? Because she stopped feeding the flesh. And in that sacrifice, authority exploded. That's the secret. When you fast, the darkness that once tolerated you begins to fear you. And that fear spreads. Suddenly, your home feels different. Peace enters the hallway. Conversations shift. People call you and say, "I don't know why, but I feel different around you." It's because something has broken open. You've become a walking altar. Not just a believer, but a carrier of presence. Not just someone who prays, but someone who hosts fire. And fire changes everything it touches. But this kind of fallout comes at a price. It's not glamorous, it's not popular, it's not comfortable. Fasting will humble you, strip you, expose you. But in that emptying, God fills you. In that dying, something awakens. You begin to see people differently. You speak with precision, not impulse. You love deeper. You fear less. You become dangerous to hell. Not because you scream louder, but because you've quieted your flesh long enough to hear the strategies of heaven. You've just discovered a weapon that shifts the heavens, shakes hell, and sets captives free. But here's the mystery. Why is it that almost no one talks about this? Why are churches silent? Why do sermons skip it? Why has this ancient discipline used by prophets, apostles, even Christ himself, become a lost art because Satan buried it? Intentionally, carefully, strategically. And in the next part, we uncover the cover-up, what hell knew, and what the church forgot. Part 8. The secret Satan tried to bury. This is the secret Satan never wanted you to find. Not because it's complicated, not because it's hidden in ancient languages, but because it's dangerously simple. Fasting terrifies hell. It doesn't require talent. It doesn't require platform. It doesn't care how long you've been saved. It only requires hunger. Real hunger for God, for truth, for holiness, for freedom. And that is what makes it unstoppable. Because when someone truly fasts, when they disconnect from the noise of the world and reattach themselves to the voice of heaven, they become a threat hell can't predict. Let's be honest. Most Christians don't fast. Most churches don't teach it. And when they do, it's watered down, framed as a diet, stripped of its urgency. Why? Because the enemy has done everything in his power to bury this weapon beneath modern comfort. He wants you well-fed but weak, entertained but ineffective, busy but barren. He's not afraid of a church with lights, fog machines, and motivational messages. He's afraid of a church that fasts. If the church rediscovers the power of fasting, hell's reign is finished. Because fasting isn't just abstaining, it's awakening. It's a declaration of war. It's a return to the raw, trembling hunger that once shook cities, broke chains, and raised the dead, and history proves it. The early church fasted, the prophets fasted, Jesus fasted, the apostles fasted, and wherever they did, demons screamed and revival erupted. So what happened? Over time, the enemy replaced fire with formulas. He turned surrender into schedules and fasting into a forgotten footnote. He convinced believers that comfort was Christian, that convenience was holy, and that sacrifice was legalism. But the truth has never changed. Fasting remains one of the most powerful weapons in the arsenal of heaven, and when it's picked up by even one hungry soul, hell begins to panic. This is why the devil fights this content. This is why he distracts you, tempts you, and dulls your appetite. Because he knows when the remnant fasts, revival is not optional. It's inevitable. So let me speak plainly. If you're watching this, you're not here by accident. You are part of a remnant. A group heaven is raising and hell is resisting. A group that doesn't want church as usual, but power as it was meant to be. And that power begins with hunger. Not just to be free, but to make others free. Not just to pray, but to pray with authority. Not just to feel better, but to burn brighter. So the question is no longer, should I fast? The question is, am I willing to become the kind of person hell fears? Because this is no longer a teaching, this is a summons. Part 9, the final call. The ancient path awaits. If you've watched this far, it means something in your spirit has already awakened. Maybe it's been quiet for years. Maybe it's been buried under church routines, self-help sermons, or religious burnout. But now, something's burning again. Not hype, not emotion, hunger. And if you're tired of powerless religion, of prayers that feel hollow, churches that entertain but don't equip, of singing songs but never seeing chains break, then you already know what to do. The path isn't new, it's ancient. It was walked by prophets who wore sackcloth, not suits, by apostles who fasted in prisons, not platforms, and by Christ himself, who began his ministry in the wilderness, not the temple. This is your moment, not to try harder, but to surrender deeper. Choose a method, choose a time, choose the fast that fits the battle you're facing, and don't wait for next month. Don't wait for the church to announce it. Don't wait for comfort to give you permission. Start tomorrow. And when the temptations intensify, when your body cries out for the familiar, when distractions rise like waves, don't be discouraged. That's how you know you've scared the enemy. Because fasting is not just a spiritual discipline, it's a spiritual disturbance. It interrupts the systems of darkness that were built to keep you numb. And the moment you unplug, hell scrambles. Because you're no longer predictable. You're no longer easy to manipulate. You're no longer feeding what's been feeding on you. Breakthrough doesn't come through comfort. It comes through an ancient path. One walked by Christ himself. And that path, it's narrow, it's quiet, it's wild. It leads into the wilderness, but it ends in power. That's what Jesus showed us. Before he healed the sick, cast out demons, multiplied loaves, and walked on water. He disappeared into silence. He fasted. He fought. He emerged different. So will you. You may not feel ready. But fasting was never for the ready. It was for the willing. Because God doesn't need your perfection. He needs your yes. So let this be that moment. The moment you draw a line in the sand. The moment you say, no more powerless faith. No more secondhand fire. No more cycles without breakthrough. From this day forward, let fasting become part of your rhythm. Let surrender become your signature. Because when you take this ancient path, you will find yourself standing in the footsteps of warriors, prophets, and saints, and yes, the Son of God himself. But for some of you, fasting isn't just about discipline, it's about legacy. Coming up, the final message, a word for the older generation, because your hunger might just ignite theirs. You've lived long enough to know that not everything loud is powerful and not everything popular is true. But what if the strength you've searched for over decades of faith, prayer, and waiting was always hidden in the simplicity of hunger? Fasting isn't just for the young or the radical, it's for the wise. For those who understand that true power isn't in performance, but in surrender. This video has uncovered an ancient path walked by prophets, saints, and Christ himself. And maybe now more than ever, your voice, your example, your fast could be the breakthrough someone younger is waiting to see. When you fast, you don't just change your life, you shift your legacy. It's not too late, not to grow, not to fight, not to burn. Because in a world addicted to comfort, your quiet hunger could awaken the sleeping church. Your generation carries wisdom the enemy fears. Let your fast become a flame, one that your children and their children will follow in the dark. The time is now. And the fire begins with you.